Ciao, y'all. Hello, amici. Joe here from iknowespresso.com. iknowespresso.com. There's not much of a website there, but it's because I spend most of my time working on espresso machines and coffee machines and grinders and such, which is what I really prefer to do. And occasionally I make a video because there's nothing that I have found out there with the information that I think you might need or that I want to convey. So let's jump into this machine. This is a Breville Express, Barista Express it's commonly called. There are a couple of different versions of this one. It's the model number is the BES870XL. Wow. And then there are two designations beyond that, a /A and a /B. Look out for another video that looks at a couple of, or the biggest difference between those two versions. But for now, while I have this one in the shop before I return it to the client, I just wanted to mention about how this one failed, because I don't see information out there that might be helpful to someone who actually has this machine and isn't sure what's going on with it. So the failure on this one and on lots of them, actually it's a fairly common failure. I've had several machines that have had this same failure. And as I'm talking about the different technical elements, I'll pop up some still photos and maybe a short video here or there meshed into this one that will give you an actual image of what's going on. But what happens is there is a circuit board within the machine that is commonly called the TRIAC board, T-R-I-A-C. It's a transistor of sorts that is within the circuit board of the machine. And that can fail. Okay, no big deal. Lots of electronic circuitry fails in espresso machines and electronic devices. But this particular machine, that TRIAC will fail in two different ways. And the TRIAC is basically a switch, an electronic switch. I'm really going to simplify it just because there's no point in getting the technical information of it. But the TRIAC is basically a switch. And its purpose in the case of this machine is to switch the boiler on and off. So just really imagine that a switch that is turning the boiler on and off. And it's turning the boiler on and off in response to temperature sensors and the circuitry, the other circuitry in the machine, what temperature you want it to be that you preset it at, etc. But when that switch fails, it can have really dire consequences, or it can just fail in a good way, more or less. The failure either way keeps you from using the machine properly, but one type of failure doesn't cause any further damage, whereas the other type of failure does or could cause further damage, and that's why I want to kind of expose that at this juncture. So if the TRIAC fails in one way, all that happens is when you go to turn on the machine, it may come on, but it will never come up to temperature. That power light will continually flash and flash and flash, and these lights will never come on because the switch, remember, that turns the boiler on, that's the TRIAC, is broken in a way that it cannot turn the boiler on. Okay, so that's a catastrophic failure because you can't use the machine. But at least when it breaks in that way, it doesn't do any further damage, and you can have that repaired. I've repaired it several times on different machines. There is a different type of failure of that exact same part which is more problematic, and that is that the TRIAC, that switch, can fail in the on position. And in fact, it fails in such a way that it turns the boiler on even when the machine is completely off. And that's important. I'm going to repeat it again. It can fail in a way that it turns the boiler on even though the machine is turned off. So as long as the machine is plugged in and there is power to it, it's possible that the TRIAC fails in a way that the switch is on all the time, even though the machine is off. And when it fails in that direction, then we have more problems, because then the boiler actually heats up to a level that it's not intended to go to, because it's not under the control of the rest of the circuitry, as I mentioned earlier. The temperature probe and the other mechanisms that turn the TRIAC on and off, which then turns the boiler on and off, those are out of the system because the machine isn't even on. So when that happens, you need to act quickly. That's what we're getting to, is that the boiler will be very hot. The top of the machine will be hot, hotter than it even is when it's working properly and the machine is on. And that means that there's a problem, because if you see the machine is turned off and yet this cup rest up here is hot, quite hot, then you know right away that there's a problem and you need to unplug the machine immediately. If you notice that, unplug it immediately. Okay, there's another way you might be able to tell. Let's say it fails while you're using the machine, so you don't notice that this surface is hot even though the machine is off. So let's say the machine is on, you're using it, and then at some point before you turn it off, the TRIAC fails. Well, what will happen is yes, this surface will still get very hot, hotter than normal, but you'll also notice that when you go to use the hot water spout or try to get water or coffee from the group head, it will be over hot. It will be steam, in fact. The water spout will be spitting out water mixed with steam, very, very hot and under some pressure. And the same for the group head. Whether you have the portafilter on or not, you'll be able to tell that it's way, way too hot, hotter than what you would expect. So, and unfortunately, when it fails that way, it's really kind of hard to tell unless you're paying attention, and that's why I'm alerting you to it, because it can be a problem. The thing that it causes, it's a kind of a cascading effect. If you catch it soon enough, no problem. If it goes on for some time, it can damage the O-rings on some of the water lines. It can also damage the high limit switch. There's all kinds of other extra switches to keep the boiler from sort of melting down, you might say, and to keep the heating element from frying or from breaking. So there's extra protection, but at each level, if those protections fail, then it could really be the life of the machine is gone. So just be alerted that if this top surface is very, very hot without the machine even being on, if it's plugged in, then you know immediately that there's a problem and you should unplug it as quickly as possible. If the TRIAC fails while you're using it and you're getting superheated water from the water spout or superheated water from the group head, then that's another indication that there's a problem. Don't just turn it off, unplug it as well, and then get it in for service, because that part can be replaced. Not everybody knows how to do that or could do it, but it can be done. And so I just want to alert you to that fact so that you don't do further damage. In this machine's case, for instance, fortunately the high limit switch triggered often enough where it kept any real big damage being done, except the O-rings were flat spotted and not melted because they're silicone, but they were misshapen, and it's only the ones that were attached to the boiler. So that's how we know that this can happen. And that high limit switch is really not meant to be an on-off switch, a thermostat like the TRIAC board is meant to be. So that high limit switch shouldn't really have to turn on, off, on, off, on, off as often as it was, but it was. But the trouble is that as soon as that high limit switch cools down a little bit, it clicks back on, and then it allows the boiler to superheat again. It could happen that limit switch goes bad, which this one did, and then if it gets too much hotter, it will blow the thermal fuse. Those are all protections, but they can all fail, and eventually if that thermal fuse blows, then we have that issue where the boiler doesn't come on at all. So just to give you a little insight and to help you to know what to do if you experience those symptoms, the big thing is unplug it if you experience any of that overheating, because it could do further damage if you don't act fairly quickly. Okay, I hope that helps, and stay tuned for this other video of a side-by-side of the A and B models of this machine. Okay, ciao y'all, thanks for watching.